Africa was what a lot of those people in the newly independent countries wanted to happen. So you have a tension in the title, Red Africa, things from the time. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were probably only Mozambique and Angola were formally communist. Maybe Ethiopia for a short period. And I'm not sure that any other African country actually adopted communist politics as its founding. Anyway, so when we have the book Red Africa, it's designed to attract people. What is this Red Africa? But when we had the exhibition showing in London, like it was here, we had a number of Africans who came in and said, well, I don't see it. It's not African enough. Which maybe brings me on to the second point, that it's not African in a kind of simplistic sense. There's contributions which reflect on, shall we say, the Eastern European input as well as the Soviet input. There's this project from Yugoslavia, Lapidovic. Anyway, he's still alive, filmmaker who worked with the FLN and produced a kind of early wall newspaper, only an earlier version of the digital things that we all now have on our computers, about what it was like to be on the front line in Algeria. And we also have a number of works which we'll come round to, which document the non-aligned movement's connection to Africa. But I'm just going to start over here, because these three images by Paula Ratcliffe in a way emblematize the starting concept of the exhibition, which was to look at traces of communist presence, socialist ideology in Africa. And you can still find in Angola, like as maybe in Mozambique too, you can still find these traces of murals from the period of independence. And Jo Ratcliffe's done a lot of projects in Namibia and in Angola. And she's one of the few artists, sadly, who couldn't visit the exhibition in its different locations because she's based in South Africa and she's lived there for a while. And it also connects with one of the aesthetic themes to do with traces. So you have the wall, traces of posters on the wall there, the Cuban soldiers leaving their mark on some dwellings in Viramundo in Angola in the work by Kiluanja Kiahenda, who's from Angola. And around the corner we have other works which are dealing with surfaces, which was one of the ideas behind the show. And then with Angela's work we also have this focus on cinema. This is the first time actually that these three pieces of Angela's have been brought together. These three maquettes for the seminars, the Super 8 workshops that Jean Rouge organized in Mozambique, as being invited by Rui Guerra, who also invited Jean-Luc Godard to do these workshops with peasants and soldiers in the newly liberated Mozambique. The idea was that they would, in a way, present images to people who could somehow recognize and learn from the moving image. I mean, it's an anecdote that I haven't told anybody, I don't think, but I also met my partner Isaac in such a screening of what providing water supply to Mozambique. We had these documentary films with subtitles in French, and so I was translating from French into English. He decided that he wanted to sit next to me. I decided that he needed to be educated in the water supply issues in newly liberated Mozambique. And so we always tell this story. But it was a fascinating moment of new technology being available to be used in a revolutionary context. And the equipment they had from France that Jean Rouge was also part of the workshop enabled you to shoot, develop, and screen work in a single day. So even though they didn't have video at that time, you could still have the feedback. So here you have Angela's Ferreira's got the image of feedback of the audience watching images of themselves from earlier in the day or maybe earlier in the week. And there you see similar kind of activity going on. And of course, as you all know, and Anna Bologna's really written a lot about it, Angela's work has this wonderful connection to Soviet constructivist art, the work of Kluchis in particular. It's very, I mean, Angela, I think, is such an amazing artist because she manages to have a conversation about Soviet, utopian Soviet constructivist architecture and kind of documentary realism in the same work, which I just think, I mean, all her work is amazing, and we're very happy to have these three pieces and then put them in dialogue with Isaac's two pieces over here, which are also about cinema. Yeah, 2005, so 12 years ago, Isaac made a film in Burkina Faso and called Phantom Afrique, based a little bit on the Michel Reyes, André Gide travels that were documented. And these are two photographic works that come out of that project. The first one is, you see, an empty cinema space in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina. And these spaces like this that accommodate films for the Ouagadougou Film Festival, which is one of the premier festivals, together with Carthage in Africa, and was set up by Thomas Sankara as a kind of utopian project to develop higher education and media education in Burkina against the wishes of, or against the advice of the World Bank, who wanted the Burkinabe to stay as like peasants and agricultural workers rather than, as it were, fully fledged educated people, I suppose. It also has slight resonance of what is on the screen, because there's obviously been a crisis in cinema production in Africa. So Isaac's work reflects a bit on that, and there you see again that this is a real monument in Ouagadougou, which has a kind of visual connection to the mechanism of the camera. Here we see some of the archive film from the period. This was a work that was, as it were, commissioned for the exhibition. I was doing some research in Belgrade, and I was able to put Milica in contact with Labudovic through the Algerian embassy. There was a screening of a film I made with Isaac on Frantz Fanon, and the Algerian ambassador came and said, "Oh, we're in touch with Stevan Labudovic." And so out of that came a dialogue about the role of cinema in the non-aligned movement. And I mean, most of you will know about the non-aligned movement, but just very briefly, the work opposite by this traveling communique group features a big poster image taken from the meeting that formalized the foundation of the non-aligned movement in Belgrade in the 1950s, I think. Far in here we can see the map of the travels that Joseph Broz Tito made as he was talking to different newly independent African states about forming this and supporting this movement, which is intended to be a bridge between, or an intervention between, Soviet Russia and the United States, a movement which was not aligned with geopolitics. And this artist collective here, Traveling Communique, represented some of the documents from the founding moments of that movement. In London, we had this piece by Kiluanji at the beginning of the exhibition. It worked better there than it was here. I mean, here it's good where it is, but again, you have this visual thing of a surface, that you're reading the surface. And in this case, it's telling you that there's a ship called Karl Marx beached in Luanda, which had a sort of symbolic connection to the fate of capitalism socialism in Africa. In this section here we have three works. We have the work by the South Korean artist Che Won-jun. On the video it's by Philippa Cesar, and then the TKM, Congolese artist.
He's like Chibumba Kandamatulu is a Congolese artist who is based or was based in Lubumbashi, like the second city, so to say, of Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the big Congo, so to say. And he is a chronicler of the Congolese history. So he was. These are only two works from a whole series of works where he kind of gives a whole narration of Congolese history from the time when it was the King of Belgium's property until the revolutionary times. And you can see here Patrice Lumumba, who was for a very short moment in time the prime minister of Congo, who was then later assassinated. And he became a hero figure in Congolese history. And these two paintings depict, on the one hand, the first speech of Lumumba, which was really a very radical and very brave moment, because he was, for the first time ever, he was really accusing the Congolese, the Belgian king to be for his atrocities that he did during the colonial time, because the Belgian colonialism was a very violent and very cruel version of violence, and so he was accusing all that in this speech. So it was a very radical moment that is remembered until today, even if he later became a ambivalent figure in Congolese history. And on the other side we see a monument that doesn't exist in reality, but the artist is kind of inventing a monument for Lumumba in this way. So two iconic works from a whole series of a narration of Congolese history. And since Congo was not socialist officially, but Lumumba had a lot of contact to other left-wing politicians, and he had also his idea, his vision of the future was more leaning towards socialism. But later, after the assassination, Congolese history became quite different, as we know, with the figure of Mobutu, who was really allying with other political ideas. So a short moment in time, I would say, that was really important and really visionary and maybe very radical, and that is somehow depicted here in these two paintings.
Very briefly, on the monitor you can't see it so well today now with the light. Is this work by Philippa Cesar. Philippa has her work is multi-layered. You can't see it so well here because there's the archive, there's a performance in front of the archive, and then it's somehow being delivered or presented in the House of World Cultures in Berlin. And then she also supplements it with, in this case, presentations of Sana himself. So it's a really interesting project in trying to reactivate the archive, because so many of the African film archives have disintegrated. Like the Chad one went up in flames, Mozambique was partially destroyed. So her strategy is, as an artist, is to see what you can do to reactivate the fragments of the archives which still exist. Around it we have these various maquettes and documentary photographs, as well as this 3-screen video installation there by Che Won-jun, South Korean artist I mentioned. And he's done extensive research on the connection between North Korea and Africa. North Korea had, I think at its heyday, about 16, 17 embassies in Africa. It was trying to prevent South Korea getting into the United Nations. They invested a lot in foreign policy, and that included donating these massive sculptures to newly independent nations. Some of them are fairly old, but this one in Senegal was only completed a few years ago. So what started as a sort of project, ideological, cultural, not warfare exactly, became a commercial activity as well. So apparently they're still working on a massive sculpture for Robert Mugabe. I think probably he'll die and then they'll put it up. But these, as you can see from these documentary photographs, these statues are quite massive.
You think, you really think this is a good sample of socialist friendship? This awful sculptures.
Well, they thought of it, but that's what's interesting about that. That's what's interesting about their language, is that they thought it was a friendship donation. I mean, one of the ideas.
They thought.
Yeah, they thought. Different notions of friendship. It's a very ambiguous, I think, as I say a little bit in my introduction to the catalogue, it's a very ambiguous word, friendship. The bear hug is not so straightforward. Do you want to be hugged by the Russian or North Korean bears? I'm not sure. Trump, exactly. Okay, so
is this a maquette?
Yeah, what the artist designed these maquettes, so they're retrospectively done. He got the pictures and visited the sites, and you'll see there's interviews with various people about for example, some of the maquettes, or some of the statues already taken down.
What country is this?
Well, it's 3 different countries: Ethiopia in the Addis Ababa, Windhoek in Namibia, and that's Senegal, Dakar. And again, they're all North Korean donated. I think the Ethiopian one was donated at the time of the communist Derg government, whereas the other 2 were probably partially funded by the local governments, because the North Koreans developed the skill in doing massive sculpture. I mean, it wasn't just an ideological thing. If you want to do a 10-story high sculpture, then you probably would go to the Mansudai factory in North Korea, because they could probably do you one. And in fact, they're doing something in Cambodia right now. So
not only the North Korean. I remember in Cape Verde, for instance, and in Angola also, you have huge statues of like that, made by the Russian, often by the Russian.
So maybe it comes from that period, and the North
they
Koreans took
always
the
look
technology.
the same. Mille Cathedral and Montlan, not Montlan. No, Montlan.
But they are also from the Mansudai, as far as I know.
Yeah.
They're all like the North Korean factories, so to say. Also these early ones. They all look the same.
They look all the same. It's always the same position, you know. The only thing they change is a little the faces.
Okay, so 2 more works here in this, 2 more artists, I would say. They digitized all his press photographs and then organized them in this sort of structuralist arrangement. So you get an idea of the protocol for visiting heads of state, and you see what happened in different countries. The only one he visited in this tour was Ghana, but he did make other stops which they haven't included. When it started off, it was a massive project, and we've sort of edited it down, because in a way, although you can get a sense of going into the archive, it's not, in a way it's deliberately not edited. It's more like a resource. So Nadine, do you want to do Capella for us?
Yeah, so Capella we included because he includes a certain kind of socialist aesthetic in a very individual way. So what you see here are like all either collages or like there's also one line note cut, and also these collages here. And he's like he's a very special, unique figure in the Angolan art scene. So all the other artists also like like call him mestre, like a master, and he's I would say he's one of these prophet artists in a way, because he has a very like unique way of working. All his works are always unfinished, so it's a quite ephemeral like way of working, because usually he reworks all his works again and again, and he uses a lot of these photocopies and pictures and little objects that he includes in his works. And what you also can see here, maybe the one on top is most like iconic here. He's there using a photocopy of the first Angolan president Agostinho Neto, but surrounding him with this quite like more Christian Catholic aura, plus this object on the forehead, plus mirrors, plus coins, and in a way he's kind of creating a hybrid image of very different cultural traditions, because I also read their his own local tradition, the Bakongo culture. Capella uses this mirror and he kind of transfigures it, and he puts the mirror on the forehead or on the shoulders, like kind of using this power or this magical device, but making something different out of it. And what I also like very much in Capella's work, that he's always putting himself into a network of references. Here you see like a lot of names written around him, and you see Obama, which is interesting, if you put the figure of Agostinho Neto together with Obama, maybe it speaks about a vision or a utopia, a failed utopia perhaps, that is not there anymore. But you also see, like for example, in the work below, the black one in the black frame, you will see like on the bottom you see like the names Nuno, Rasta, Raul, Kiloanji, Yunamin, Orlando, and all these are names of other artists. So Kiloanji refers to Kiloanji Kiahenda that we've seen here. So he's putting himself like in a net of other artists and references, which I think is very unique. Under the other two sides, you see Hojia Henda and Deolinda Rodriguez. Both of them were guerrilla fighters in the struggle, the anti-colonial struggle. Both of them died before independence, and they became hero figures in the Angolan national discourse around independence. So, and this is like also Capella's homage maybe on these two people. Just maybe one note on this suite. You can see the artist himself on the upper left. So he's also putting himself into this portrait style, which is a very I think interesting, that he is able to put himself in the same way than Agostinho Neto, the two hero figures, but also the current president, Eduardo dos Santos. And he's kind of a bit mocking with Eduardo maybe by putting him with this feather that also reappears quite often in his work. So he's playing around with these portraits, maybe ironic, but I don't think he would say it's ironic. It's more his way of kind of creating this net of references, like I would try to interpret it.
Yeah, we should thank Andre Cunha and Nadine were responsible for getting the work here. One of the nice things about the exhibition has been it was never intended to be a touring exhibition, but actually in each venue it's managed to kind of attract other works. So Nadine was able to bring in both Capella and also TKM. So that it has a sort of more organic relation to the place. Here, of course, in a way, it all starts in the Lusophone area. So we're very pleased that it could come back here. So Tonels is really like a big practical joke, I would say, in that it proposes that there was a joint Soviet-Cuban space mission and gives you this sort of series of artifacts alleged to have come from the space mission. It's a sort of fiction, but it also reflects the desire of a lot of those newly independent socialist nations to be involved in the space project that the Soviet Union was developing. He has this very slightly kitsch, humorous take on the Soviet socialist iconography. You have, he's putting himself with Lenin and Gramsci and so on. You can recognize the various participants. This Russian ship, together with Yuri Gagarin and Laika, the first dog in space. This is very tongue-in-cheek, and a lot of his work has this sort of, I mean, for Cuban, I think one of the reasons he's probably not or wasn't living in Cuba is that it's seen as being a bit too irreverent. But then, when you look in this little photo here, I think Romanenko and Tamayo, who went up in, because there was the Soviet program, had this what was called intercosmos element, where citizens from fraternal countries could go to space, and in this case the Cuban citizen who was invited was this black Cuban Tamayo, which nobody apparently knows that the first black American in space, there was a black American in space, but he was Cuban. So there's a sort of factual basis to what Tonnelle does, but it's kind of like enigmatic at the same time. You have a real little Cuban Russian book and then this fictional space program, and again over the drawings that he does. There was never a joint Cuban-Soviet span-made exhibition. But then Romanenko and Tamayo again with the little house, which sort of looks a little bit like the Tarkovsky house upside down. And then he's added a jazz soundtrack to it all on these headphones.
And here we have the rocket.
Yeah, and that's the rocket, yes, exactly.
When I'm looking for these coins, I remember a lot of fragments from the Soviet films, like the Soviet leaders, at that time when the Soviet leaders were in African country, and I think the first one, not the first, but the famous one was Leonid Brezhnev, and in 1961 she was in Guinea, and he gave their coin with Lenin to the Guinean pioneers. This is a fact. So I don't know. You can see which one, but maybe this one or that one from Lisboa. Yeah.
Okay.
It was always in the Soviet films that the Soviet leaders gave the coins. For example, Soviet Marines, they give the coins to African Marines, then put it in themselves, or just symbolized the Soviet friendship, Soviet ideological friendship.
Shall we go around and you tell us a little bit about your project, Alexander?
I've discovered around 7 years ago there in some of Russian archives there are films, the film footage. We can call it film footage, but in the fact it is a films that the Soviet Union supported from 1956 to 1991 until Perestroika. So the biggest problem is that it is a lot of films, thousands of films. So a lot of genres, like film visits or films about the countries, political films. So and my idea is to construct all this footage in one film. This is only the part that is there, just first step. Just first step, because in my documentary film that will show me in this end of this year, so I will put also 8mm material by their protagonists. It was shot by the protagonists, by the engineers, marines, militaries, so doctors, also filmmakers. That's also interesting. So, I will construct the Soviet 35mm footage with private footage. Yeah, that quite was the people were shot without ideology, just for his for their own just for fun. I mean, this is interesting. Yeah. To compare the 35mm official footage and unofficial footage. That's the second step of the project. Then, but in this installation, it is just my idea was to show the ways of propaganda in the Soviet films, because this way is quite usual in the Soviet films. That in this way you can find in archive the films I don't know about whole countries that were in the focus of the Soviet Union. So this is an example. So some kind of on the African soil. So
but it's constructed. It has this historical development. So you start with the colonists leaving, and then the Soviets arriving, and then different forms of aid, and
yes,
cut
exactly.
between. But you'll see when you see the whole film, cut between different countries. But thanks, Alexander. And then on the left, just on this monitor here, is a collection of images from Soviet propaganda featuring people of color, which is compiled by the Russian artist Yevgeny Fix. He's very relaxed about how the material is shown, so it's an arbitrary collection of material that he and researchers got in Russia, in Moscow primarily, I think. And in a way, it's here as a sort of background to remind us of the complex relationship complex role race had in the Soviet Union. I mean, the simple argument is that the Soviet Union wasn't a racist country until almost just before perestroika. That is to say, during the 30s, a lot of black Americans migrated, engineers and professional people migrated to the Soviet Union because they could have jobs and they were seen as heroic strugglers against capitalist imperialism, and not just people like Paul Robeson, but also the actor Wayland Rudd that this project is named after. A lot of the cotton industry in Tashkent was developed with the help of black Americans who were previously working in the south of the United States. So in a sense, black people in the Soviet Union in that period had a kind of heroic status. But then when Khrushchev started investing funds in the studentship program, which was in a way the start of this project, researching the studentships that in the post-war period Africans and Asians could have going to Russia, people began to feel that too much money was being spent on these kind of friendship activities and not enough on local people. So that is regarded as one of the sources of the racism that people definitely began to feel in the Soviet Union, and which Abdurrahman Sissako documents in his film October. Anyway, I think that's kind of it. We could ask questions, we can go and have a coffee, we can come. We have 2 days of screenings and discussions as well. But
the screening is here?
well, no, these are all at the Saint Georges Cinema.